I think there are two things. One is it a good decision financially? The other is it a moral decision to go out at this time in the history of Christ Church's pain and slow reinstatement as a city, where there's still many people on the east side suffering in compromised housing. Is that the best way to go to the city and say, please give your money so we can reinstate a building? So I think that's more important, to be honest, than the financial. If there was no risk, I think a lot of people would say, if there's no risk, let's go for reinstatement. But I would hope that people would also ask the question, is that the best way to spend $55 million? And I think that's a real question. Is it the best way to spend
Can you answer that for me? And I'm sorry to,
million?
okay, right, so there's $100 million is the cost. Now, you've just raised
no,
that
that's fine.
then, and you raised this in the press. You wrote a little opinion piece for the press, and you said in it, a question I ask is whether the hurting city of Christchurch will be better helped by fixing this broken building, or by attending to the pain of the people who are still suffering. In other words, are you saying it is not moral to spend this much money on restoring the cathedral?
I'm saying something a bit more nuanced than that. I'm saying it's a moral question. Speaking personally, I don't think people's pain is addressed by reinstating a building. So I think the money is better spent helping people. And right from the beginning, we've said people before buildings. So I do think it is a moral question, but I do think it's a nuanced and a complex question, and there is more than one way of answering it.
Absolutely, and the feedback we've received, and by golly, it's polarised. But those who are begging, pleading,
yes,
demanding
absolutely.
restoration say, actually, this building matters to us. This building is so intrinsically linked with the history and the story of Christ Church that our pain would be greater were it not restored.
Yes, and I've heard those. I've heard many, many people say that. I've also heard at least an equal number say, all we want to do is get on with it. And they use phrases that I wouldn't use, such as bowl it over, knock it down, and so on. We've always said we would do a careful deconstruction, but it is polarized, and that's one of the reasons I decided to take it to the Synod, which is a larger body of people, and not all even within the city, because they represent the rural parishes as well. Because to be quite honest, church property trustees are not of a single mind about where to go with this. And I don't vote when I'm chairing church property trustees, but I listen to both sides, and it's not unanimous as to where we should be going. We haven't taken a formal vote, but we talk and talk. And just like the city, there's more than one opinion.
Absolutely. If you decided to deconstruct or demolish, or whatever term you wanted to use, in fact, you're not able to do that, are you? Because this is a Category 1 heritage building, and it has protections attached to it that make demolition or deconstruction almost impossible, at least in the short to medium term.
Well, that's not what I'm told. And I don't quite know what you mean by short and medium term, but we've had two different legal opinions, and the first said there is probably a 60% chance that you would get permission to deconstruct. So we went to a QC and had a second very careful legal opinion. Remember, the word is opinion. And he came in more strongly and said he couldn't see us being refused. Now, there is this argument that the best way of doing that is simply to go out and fundraise for 2 years, see if the money comes rolling in, and if not, at that point, seek permission to deconstruct. But there's something, for me, intrinsically wrong with that, which will give it 2 years. The end of 2 years, those who really want reinstatement will say, why don't you give it 3 years? And those who want to just get on with it say, we've wasted more time. So I don't think that middle way is very helpful, but it is one thing we've talked about.
Speaking to you and reading that piece you wrote for the press, and really drilling down into everything you've said and not said about this, it is my sense, and can we speak personally, because you are the bishop, that in fact you would prefer not to spend $100 million on restoring the cathedral. That is your personal preference, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. Some time ago, some people in the medical profession who are GPs and pediatricians, but also have a particular interest in mental health, particular responsibility in mental health, came and talked to myself and other people who are Christian leaders about the crisis state of mental health and ill health, mental disease in our city and region. Young people and young adults are self-harming and suiciding at alarming rates. We need to help them. And I keep thinking about the amount of money that is needed to access counselors and other people to build community, to build human relationships, so that every young person knows there is someone who truly cares for them and will be at their side no matter what. The moment we're failing our young people, we're also failing our elderly. That's a different story altogether. But I do think there are a number of critical issues facing the city that if we don't look after the people, God will not be glorified.
So God is not glorified through the building. God is glorified by doing the right thing.
Well, God is glorified by beauty. Yeah, no. Let me clarify that, because is not. In this instance, we're talking about a very particular instance.
Absolutely.
God is glorified whenever there is beauty, and there is beauty in the cathedral. So do not let me suggest that's not present there.
I'm just confused though about the inference that, well, obviously you've got $42 million of insurance money and you can replace the cathedral if you are given permission to, and it's a Category 1 heritage building, and that may be harder than the advice you've been given. But anyway, you can replace the cathedral. The government is saying it will put $10 million cash in and loan you $15 million. So would that $25 million go to mental health services in Christ Church? Would Philip Burden and the people at the GCBT be fundraising for mental health? In other words, whilst on the face of it, what you're saying makes enormous sense, it doesn't axiomatically equate to the money you are not spending on the cathedral going to the things, the services you are describing.
Never make your decision on what likely will be the outcome. Make a decision on where the need is most acute and where the crying need is. Ask people to focus on that. So no, I don't think that GCBT is going to fundraise for mental disease amongst the young. I do think that people of goodwill who truly care could let their voice be heard by government that more needs to be done.
And does that exclude restoring the cathedral? You see what I'm getting at here? You are making a compelling moral case for raising our voices on behalf of an overwhelmed, underfunded mental health service in Christ Church. And we've covered this on Chch. We've spoken to the people who are not getting the care they need and deserve. But if you don't restore the cathedral, are they going to get that care? Or do you see my point?
I do see your point, and I understand you're drawing a distinction, but at the same time, what is the church saying if it encourages the investment of over $100 million in a building in a city that is truly hurting at the moment?
What is the church saying?
And you know, and I know, and I won't insult you by listing all the needs, but the needs are great. Is this the time to reinstate a heritage building that in England would be seen as a large parish church? It's not in terms of a global significance.
Yes, but we're
not the Taj Mahal.
But we're not in England, are we? I mean, we don't have the Taj Mahal. And actually,
no, we're not.
And if you look at buildings in this country that are truly revered by their communities, surely the Christ Church Cathedral is very, very near the top of the list, isn't it?
It is revered. It's not, however, in the 21st century, particularly fit for purpose. We loved it. Don't get me wrong. I was installed there. I loved taking services there. I loved preaching there. I love gathering the community there, wide and far. All that was absolutely marvelous. But if we were starting again, it's not actually what we would build today. So then you raise the question of, is the church called to be first cousin to a museum, or is it a place for the worship of the living God? And I think it's the place for worshiping the living God, and to reinstate a very damaged building so that people can say we like the outside of it, seems to me somewhat misdirected. But I will let the Synod decide.
And I know you will, and there are 225 members of the Synod, but by golly, any of them listening to this interview are going to implicitly have a fairly clear direction from their bishop, aren't they?
No, actually, I mean, that's one that the funniest thing of this whole conversation is all the people who think that if the bishop says jump, they say how high. People disagree with the bishop all the time. And over things far more intrinsic to the faith than the future of a building. So I don't think any thought of my giving a lead and everybody falls in line. You compliment me by suggesting I have that sort of influence. We have robust discussions about all sorts of things in the church.
Right.
The Anglican Church is known for that.
Yes. Yes, you are a formidable personality, though, and you are you are a strong bishop. But let's just end with the question about compulsory acquisition, and that's something the city's mayor, Leanne Dalzell, is suggesting that the government might like to look at.
Certainly.
If you are making this a kind of moral decision, then the inference I've had from some people that might be convenient for you, that the cathedral is taken off your hands, that you can go and build a smaller cathedral elsewhere and get on with your life unencumbered by this building. Actually, that's not a solution for you, is it? You would not see that as a convenient way out if the government were to step in, as they have the powers to do in Christchurch, and take this building off your hands.
There would be some convenience to that because it would be sorted. So I'm not going to pretend there's no convenience to it. Do I think that is a good precedent for the government to take private property? I think that's a very dangerous precedent. I also wonder what the city would think they had done 25 years later. I wonder what an empty cathedral would be an icon of when, in actual fact, it wasn't being used for worship and was a place people could go and look at. I'd like to think that the purpose of the cathedral and the building of the cathedral are married to each other. So if there is compulsory acquisition, and that happens, we'll see where it goes. But I am aware that Wellington has the old St. Paul's and the new cathedral. I'm aware in Auckland there is Holy Trinity Cathedral, and then just beside it, St. Mary's. And speaking only personally, I don't think that's a very good model of how to proceed. But there it is. But if you're asking, is that what I'm hoping will happen? No, I'm not.
Okay. One final question. Your opposition to this is to the restoration, the spending of $100 million on it is clearly heartfelt and it is personally strong. You say that it won't sway the synod. Well, if I was a member of the synod, I'd be listening hard to my bishop. But if the decision is made to restore and the restoration is able to happen relatively quickly, would you want to stay bishop with that as your cathedral?
The fact that was my cathedral would in no way stop me being bishop. So one of the questions, I'm going to reword your question slightly. One of the questions I'm being asked from within the church, no one's thought of asking it from without, so I'll just make it public, is if the synod votes for reinstatement, will I, as bishop, agree to that? Because in one sense, you could say that I have a veto. The answer is I would certainly agree to that. And the only time I would use my veto is if I felt that the synod had made a decision that went against Christian doctrine. This is not about doctrine at all. This is about how we spend our money. The synod, I've actually referred it to the synod because I actually think the synod will have a wisdom that we've not managed to get at either CPT or in the public conversations. I have a lot of faith in synod, and I'm looking to see what they decide.